welcome to Global News Today, bringing you exclusive interviews with leading experts every weekday here on Arabiya English. I'm Tom Burges Watson. Coming up on today's programme, Donald Trump and Elon Musk reignite their bitter feud, with the US president threatening to deport the tech tycoon and strip federal funds for his businesses. We ask Musk's father where he sees things heading to from here and what advice he has for his son. Plus, the Israeli foreign minister says he is interested in normalising ties with Syria and Lebanon. We ask, how significant a move would that be? Hello and welcome to the programme. The war of words between President Donald Trump and the world's richest man, Elon Musk, appears to be escalating. The former allies fell out some 3 weeks ago when Musk criticised President Trump's tax cut and spending bill, which, amongst other things, would eliminate subsidies for electric vehicle purchases. Well, those subsidies benefited Musk's EV company, Tesla. Well, in his latest comments, President Trump said that Musk was upset about all of this and other things, but in a thinly veiled threat, he seemed to suggest that Musk could stand to lose a lot more than just subsidies. Well, taking to his Truth Social platform, the president also said that Musk had got more subsidies than any human being in history, and that without subsidies, he'd probably have to close up shop and head back to South Africa. Well, let's take a listen now to what President Trump has been saying.
I don't know. I think we'll have to take a look. We might have to put Doge on Elon. You know what Doge is? Doge is the monster that might have to go back and eat Elon. Wouldn't that be terrible? He gets a lot of subsidies, Peter. But Elon's very upset that the EV mandate is going to be terminated. And you know what? When you look at it, not everybody wants an electric car. I don't want an electric car. I want to have maybe gasoline, maybe electric, maybe a hybrid, maybe someday a hydrogen. If you have a hydrogen car, it has one problem, it blows up, you know? So I'm going to give that one to Peter. I'm going to let Peter test it out. The hydrogen cars, and when they blow up, it's serious.
President Trump speaking there. Well, President Trump and Elon Musk have a history of mutual provocation, and previous rows between the two men have blown over. So will this one, or have things gone too far? Well, let's cross now to Cape Town and speak to Elon Musk's father, Errol Musk, who is a friend of the show, someone we've spoken to on a number of occasions. Mr. Musk, welcome back to Al Arabiya English. Great to have you with us, and thank you very much indeed for taking the time to join us. Last time we spoke was about 3 weeks ago, and that was just after the Twitter exchange between your son and President Trump. And you said at the time that you hoped that the two men would quickly draw a line under their feud. That doesn't seem to be happening. If anything, things seem to be escalating, don't they?
Well, you know, the world is in a terrible state of flux at the moment. And I myself find it not only here in this country, but I've been overseas in the last month in 3 or 4 countries, and everywhere it seems to be that people are very confused about the way forward. I personally am very grateful that we have at least Trump and not Biden or Harris or whatever her name was in America. But I quite frankly don't quite know what to say about the things that are going on. My son is a very straightforward individual, so it's difficult not to take note of what he says, because he's not a fool. He is a very, very, how can you say, a very punctilious, or whatever the right word is, sort of person. He doesn't mess with words. He says what he means and says what he feels. So it's very difficult to ignore the things he says. As far as President Trump going against Elon, it's just so hard to understand. I can't really understand what is going on. It makes no sense to me at all.
Have you spoken to your son? I mean, how is he under the circumstances, Mr. Musk?
Well, we text each other. So at the same time, I don't like to interfere I'm the old man, so, what do I know, sort of thing. But I try to give good advice. I think it's very good for Elon's businesses to be, particularly Tesla, for example, to be distanced from politics. So in that respect, I think it's a good thing that, he's thrown, out of the internal arena of Trump's administration, and that he now has to get back to running businesses, which is what he's meant to do. At the same time, talking about starting a new party and all that kind of stuff, I've been watching it on British TV that two people want to start a new political party in England right now. Both of them have just been with the Reform Party, and now they both want to start a new party, even though Reform seems to be doing quite well. In other words, what I'm trying to say is there seems to be turmoil just about everywhere. And what the reason for the turmoil is very hard to understand. Everybody in the world is looking for a path forward to try and feel comfortable in the work that you're doing at home, wherever you are. But at the moment, things are topsy-turvy, really topsy-turvy. And one can only hope it's just, I don't know, something to do with sun flares or something like that for the moment, and hope that it will be over soon.
Okay,
I don't think that Elon differs in political opinion to Trump.
Yeah, when we spoke in June, when we spoke when the feud sort of began in the Twitter sphere, you told me you were going to be telling your son, to put a stop to this. That seemed to be your sort of fatherly advice to him.
Yes.
This feud needs to come to an end. I mean, he doesn't seem to be listening to you, does he?
Yeah. Well, it's very difficult. Human behavior, particularly when it comes to politics, is so complicated. I always use the example of, Churchill seeing England through the Second World War and then in 1945 immediately being thrown out of office. It just makes no sense at all. But all I can say is that people are at it left, right, and center, which is a good thing. Nobody's sitting back. Everybody's trying to have a say or get into the arena. So in many ways, it's probably a good thing. And probably good things will flow out of all of this. But at the moment, it's really something of what I would call turmoil. I personally don't know what to think, and I don't know what to say. I have said to Elon, please stay silent. Please don't encourage this situation. And in return, I read that he is proposing a new political party, which, quite frankly, I find it hard to believe. I just find it too hard to believe that he would do that. I don't believe it.
Do you support your son, though, for speaking out, speaking his mind about what he believes in particular against this tax and budget bill that is really what sort of started this feud in the first place? Yeah. Or do you think he should have perhaps been a little more diplomatic and kept quiet?
Yeah. Well, of course, when you write in any business, if you're in a business and you should ever be in a board meeting with the directors, I've seen board meetings where from one side of the table, they threaten to kill the guys on the other side of the table. This is at a board meeting of a big company. I mean, people's emotions get the better of them, especially when money and progress are at stake. So it's understandable. It's just strange that it's in the public, it's in the public arena that we're seeing this, because usually, of course, one never hears about this kind of thing. In some ways, that's probably a good thing. But I have suggested to my son to, cool it, just leave, don't. I mean, I have said to him as well that in order for them to rebuild the United States, because the United States needs a lot of rebuilding, they need to spend money. It's like loaning to build a home or build a building or something. It's what you have to do. And, one looks at what you're loaning against what your assets are. And in the United States, even though the deficit is 35 trillion, the country's worth about 400 trillion or 350 to 400 trillion. So it's only 10% of your assets that you're borrowing against. So in my opinion, there's no problem with borrowing in the United States and building the country. I think it's a good thing. Elon's approach is, no, we must stop borrowing any money at all. And that's not going to help anybody. You have to spend money in order to make money.
Do you think
I don't agree with that.
Do you not think
Trump's bill?
Do you not think it would be a wise idea for you to jump on a plane and perhaps have a word with your son if your messages that you're sending by text aren't being listened to?
I've always, I've never forced them in any direction, and I've always listened to them. And as I said just now, Elon is, very, very serious person. He's not given to making crazy statements. Generally speaking, he's a very someone you can rely on if he tells you something. So I can understand the feeling that they have, that they don't want to keep on borrowing money. But at the end of the day, that's what we all do every day of our lives. We borrow money in order to move forward and turn that money into more money. That's how it works. So quite frankly, I think that there's too many emotions or something involved here. I can't quite put my finger on it all. It's very interesting, and we're all lucky to be able to see it instead of it all being behind closed doors. But, at the same time, I'm very glad that Elon is back in the field where he belongs, and that is dealing with the companies that he runs. That's what I would say. I don't know what else to say.
Do you think the tension has affected Elon personally, would you say?
Do I think?
Do you feel like the tension between your son and President Trump has affected your son personally?
Well, no. Obviously, in all human relationships, when you get too, involved with one another, you become, things do go out of hand. I mean, it's normal. It's human behavior. It's one-upmanship. I use the example, for example, of Julius Caesar. He got up one morning, went to have a coffee, went to buy the Daily Tablet, walked down to the Forum, and he's just been told he's the most popular man in the Roman Empire, and people are suggesting he should be the emperor. And he arrives in the Forum, and 5 or 6 of his friends are there, and he greets them nicely, and they walk over to him, and they all put a knife in him and kill him. That's classic. That's the classic example of politics. The assassination of Julius Caesar. I mean, it's just too weird to understand these things. You have to be in the midst of political turmoil to even have a vague grasp of what is going on. I could go on. I mean, how Napoleon was elected to be the first consul is classic. It was never intended. It was a mistake. But without digressing in that direction, all those directions, I don't know. I think that the last 6 months have probably been the most tense and complicated and involved of Elon's life, for sure. In spite of all the things he's done, politics is turmoil. And, the only thing that comes close to politics, the turmoil of politics, is the turmoil of human male-female relationships, where anything can go, anything happens, And so again, I'm just hoping that this sort of thing will calm down. And at any rate, the main thing is we can see what's going on. It's open. It's in the public arena. I think it's quite a good thing in that respect. But I'm puzzled. I'm really puzzled.
Yeah, I mean, you're not the only one, Mr. Musk. I mean, we're in a situation, aren't we, where the world's richest man is threatening the world's most powerful man, and vice versa. We've got your son threatening President Trump in a veiled way, saying he's in the Epstein files. He was saying that a couple of weeks ago. Now he's saying he's going to launch a party and perhaps threatening him there in the political field. And we've got President Trump saying, Doge is the monster that might go back and eat Elon. He's also threatened him with deportation. I mean, as a father, does it worry you that your son has angered the President of the United States, Donald Trump, who's not an entirely predictable person? Does it worry you that he's angered him to this degree?
No, it doesn't. I don't see anything like that happening. I see these people, flinging, much like they do in Parliament, flinging insults at one another, as they often used to do in the British Parliament. And, because it's like protected speech in Parliament, you sort of get away with it, or in Congress. But all I can say is tempers are flaring, and everybody's determined to get their way. And in some ways, I think it's very interesting, but at the same time, it's also quite worrying. So I'd be more pleased to hear, that they make friends. They can only help each other. There's no question about it. They can only help each other by being friends. And really, something is bothering Elon, and it's difficult not to take notice of it because Elon is, as I say, a very practical person, and so it's difficult to simply say Elon is making a mistake. I don't know. I don't think he would be making a mistake. At the same time, I've seen. I was in politics in this country. I've seen tempers flare in, meetings inside chambers. Sometimes public, sometimes not public. Unfortunately, in the political world, tempers flare, and as I say, Julius Caesar found it out the hard way, and so, for example, and I think we are sitting here at an interesting point in time. Something good will come out of all this, I'm sure. I'm pretty sure that something good will come out of this, but we're certainly not back in the days of last year, where people in the US were despondent to the point of wondering where they should go to. They might have to leave the United States when Biden was the president because they saw their country falling to pieces. Sure. Now it's another story altogether. It's about, do we rebuild the United States, or do we just let it stand as it is? Or what do we do? And so we've got a situation where we have positive people arguing with each other, not negative people, positive people, both determined to do something positive for the United States.
But not just arguing, they're threatening each other. And President Trump seemed to be toying with the idea of deporting your son. Do you think your son will be deported?
No. I can't believe that. That would be ludicrous. I mean, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. It's ridiculous. You can't deport somebody who's a citizen of the United States, whose children are all citizens. He's got a lot of children. His brothers and sisters are all United States citizens. I mean, that's crazy. No, you can't do that. That's a below the belt sort of thing to suggest. I can't even believe that Trump would suggest something like that. So you have to imagine, did the media come up with that? Because here we have a chance for the media to have a heyday, and pretend that this was said and that was said. I personally, I simply don't know what to say about it. I just think that it's the most important people are very important to us all, are having it out. And so we have to stand by and see how it goes. That's all.
Yeah, I mean,
we're certainly not talking about negative people. We're talking about people with very positive agendas.
yeah, President Trump, to answer your question where this came out, he was asked by a reporter if he had plans to deport your son, and he said, "I don't know, we'll have to take a look." So he seemed to be sort of, it was a thinly veiled threat. It wasn't an overt threat.
No.
One of the other things that President Trump is reported to have said is to try to explain your son's behavior. He said something along the lines of, Elon is a big-time drug addict. Do you think there's any truth in that?
Drug addict? Oh, no. Elon had, in fact, last month when this came up, Elon went and had a public, he went and had himself checked out, and then they published the results. Of course, it was all zero and everything, zero, 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 nothing at all, no, nothing. Elon is the last person on earth to take drugs. He can barely handle alcohol, 2 beers and he's a goner. So no, Elon is not taking drugs. That's ridiculous. But none of us are that way inclined. We're all somewhat prudish when it comes to things like that. No.
Has your son, just
again, it's a question of throwing stones at each other. They're trying to throw stones. But why? I don't know. I don't think this bill is such a big deal. I mean, you need to spend money in order to rebuild the United States. You need to spend money to make money.
Sounds like you're on President Trump's side.
I just want to say, the United States can easily afford to have a national debt of 50 trillion. Easily afford it. It is such a wealthy country. It's the first world on steroids. I just spent April in the United States. Everybody is so positive. The place is perfect from one end to the other. There's not a stone, not a blade of grass out of place. Everything is so perfect. It's hard to believe in all the places I went to, which was from California to Texas. And so the United States can easily afford to have a national debt of 50 trillion, 60 trillion. What's the difference? It's an extremely wealthy country. And they don't even know what hardship is in America. No one knows what hardship is. They have no idea. 99% of the people haven't got the faintest clue what it is to do without. And that includes some of the so-called minority communities. They're so spoiled, it's ridiculous.
Casting your mind back to when your son was much younger, did he have tumultuous relationships in his private life? Does he have a history of these sorts of flare-ups with people in his personal life, his romantic life, his business life?
Yes. No. Elon has always been a sort of Puritan. Talking about those sort of Puritan Christians or whatever you call it. He's always been a sort of Puritan. In other words, you shouldn't lie, and he's quick to judge people and things like that, without really giving it much thought. And in that respect, I've always thought, well, he'll temper that. He'll as he gets older, he'll become less Puritan and more understanding of people and the failings that people have and so on, and not be so harsh on when people don't match up to his expectations. And it doesn't seem like that's happening much. He's also been in the spotlight for 20 years where, he can barely move without somebody, saying something about it. If he so much as says he likes something simple like any sort of soft drink or anything like that, it suddenly becomes the world's national soft drink. So he has to. It's very difficult to live in when the spotlight is on you day and night, and every word you say. I mean, it was 10 years ago or 8 years ago, something like that, when I read that he has 4 times more effect on the stock market in America than Warren Buffett, and 8 times more than Bill Gates. He has the most effect on if he says anything on the stock market in America. And it's hard to live in a life, to be in that sort of situation all the time, where people simply expect you to be, some sort of like God, and he's not. He's an ordinary person who's trying to figure things out all the time. And, I think there could be much more to this than just the bill, because I think, Elon is used to dealing with people in his businesses who are all sort of, AAA graduates, and all that sort of stuff. And when you get into the government, unfortunately, the people you appoint to posts around you in cabinet posts and ministerial posts and stuff like that are often not the most capable, but rather the ones that are most loyal.
Okay.
And so, whereas in business, you appoint, regardless, you appoint the most capable, regardless, because you know that the salary the person gets is going to shut them up. But in politics, in the world of, the political world, you have to appoint the people who are the most loyal to you and not the most capable. And that would probably annoy Elon no end, because he would want the most capable and not the most loyal.
Okay. I mean, just to sort of wrap things up, let me just ask you, if you'd be so kind. I mean, supposing President Trump is watching this program, what would be your message to him?
Well, listen to Elon. He's not a fool. Listen to what Elon has to say. Talk it out. Elon is not stupid. But at the same time, he's also not all-knowing. So if things are explained to Elon very, very in a way that Elon would then be able to see things differently, that's the way they should go. They shouldn't be at loggerheads. They should be able to explain it to Elon. Explain why they are doing things. Mr. Besant has said he knows about finance, and he suggests Elon should stick with rockets. Well, there's a lot of truth in that. And so they need to, these are bull elephants, all of them, bull elephants, and they simply don't operate on reason, just like in the wild. Bull elephants don't operate on reason, they operate on instinct.
Sure.
And I think that's where we are now. They're operating on instinct. And usually that produces good results. So let's see what happens. But certainly I would say to President Trump, and I don't have to tell him this, Elon is a very good person. He's a very, very good person, very, very decent, very Puritan, unfortunately, terribly Puritan, which is good and bad. And, and at the same time, Elon is young. He doesn't have the experience that I have, and that, people like Donald Trump have, who are much older and have much more experience.
Okay, in the last 10 seconds we have, a very quick message to your son.
Well, listen, and instead of talking, listen to what they have to say. Ask them to explain it to you. Ask them to explain themselves to you before you start throwing stones. Ask them to explain to you why they are doing things the way they are doing them, and you're opposed to it. Explain to them why you're opposed to it, so that at least you can come to some sort of understanding where you can move forward. And I no doubt this will happen. I have no doubt this will, in fact, happen.
Okay, we're going to have to leave it there. We're out of time. Thank you very much indeed for your time. Really appreciate it. Errol Musk, father of Elon Musk. Thank you for joining us on Arabiya English. In other news, the Israeli foreign minister has said that he is open to peace agreements with neighboring Lebanon and Syria. Well, such a move would mark a significant shift in the region, which has seen decades of war and animosity. Well, this comes in the context of new leadership in Syria after the fall of the longtime ruler Bashar al-Assad. It also comes in the context of a significantly weakened Hezbollah movement in Lebanon. Well, last month, President Trump met the new Syrian leader Ahmed al-Shara in Saudi Arabia, and he announced plans to lift sanctions on Syria. Well, yesterday I spoke to the former head of the CIA, General David Petraeus, and I asked him what he made of these reports and when this might happen.
It would be a wonderful development, I think. Lebanon clearly is still a relatively new government. The degradation of Hezbollah and reduction of its influence allowed the selection of a president after a year of wrangling, allowed the parliament to move forward, allowed the Lebanese armed forces to move into that area between the northern border of Israel and the Litani River, the area from which Hezbollah was raining down rockets on Israeli citizens, some 70 or 80,000 of whom were not able to stay in their homes for well over a year. But let's see how the political situation develops there. Likewise in Syria, I've been impressed that the leader who overthrew Bashar al-Assad, who I should acknowledge was in our detention facility in Iraq during the surge, then to be sure was with ISIS, then broke off from them, Al-Qaeda, and then broke off from them. He is saying the right things, and I think we should give him every opportunity to actually implement what it is that he has been saying, which in essence is to say that this should be a government that represents all the peoples of Syria, a country through which, as you know, many of the ethnic and sectarian and tribal fault lines of the Middle East run, and that there should indeed be majority rule, but also minority rights very clearly guarded. And I'd love to see that come about in Syria after many decades of the Al-Assads running it as their own little fiefdom in a very, very brutal and murderous fashion.
That was General David Petraeus speaking to me yesterday, and we'll pick up on some of the things he said in just a moment. We're going to cross to Hagar, who is the former director for Syria and Lebanon at the National Security Council. She served under President Barack Obama and joins us now from New York. Hagar, great to have you with us. Thanks for standing by. Obviously, the Israeli foreign minister says he's keen on normalizing ties with Syria and Lebanon. Does the United States support that, do you think?
Oh, yes, absolutely. This dates back really to President Trump's campaign, where he said on numerous occasions that his goal would be to expand the Abraham Accords as much as possible. And then you follow that with, once the administration came in, his special envoy, Steve Witkoff, on a couple occasions said publicly that Syria and Lebanon were the ones they were looking to as first countries to expand the Abraham Accords, who could make peace. And I know from my own trips to Washington, my own work there in particular, that there is a strong effort, a strong focus ultimately to get to peace between Syria, Lebanon, and Israel in particular. And if you look at the historical framework of how the Trump administration has pursued these peace accords in the Middle East, you can look toward, for example, in Trump 1.0, after they assassinated IRGC commander Qasem Soleimani, the strategy was to put Iran in a box and then move to peace. And so following the strikes that just happened against Iran, the Iranian regime and its nuclear program, you have a similar strategy that the administration could be pursuing again, as the regime licks its wounds, pivot as an opportunity to make peace. And so, yes, the answer is the administration is very interested.
And do you think Lebanon and Syria are as interested as Israel is?
Yes, well, there are some positive signs on both sides, but very different. So I want to break down each one of them. On the Syrian side, you already have al-Shara, who has proven to be a very pragmatic leader. He is, whether or not, by the way, whether or not he's Islamist, and I was in the U.S. government when we sanctioned him, I will say he is pursuing his future and the future of the Syrian state as in a pragmatic way, looking for opportunities to wipe debt, to invite investment, to have security, to push back on extremism like ISIS, and to rebuild. And he sees that it's very clear that he sees that making peace with Israel is the single best move to make that happen. When he talks about, when you have the fact that it's been publicized already that there are direct talks between Israel and Syria, this is a man pursuing these talks and engaging in this behavior in a moment that's very risky. He's number one on the ISIS kill list. So on Syria, you're seeing very positive moves. And Syria is also a very top-down system. That's what they're used to. Their system hasn't really changed yet in that regard. So he can do that. Lebanon is a totally different situation. It's much more bottom-up. And you have a lot of positive steps that show the degrading of Hezbollah and undermining of Hezbollah following their decapitation by Israel. So, for example, you have the efforts to disarm Hezbollah, the fact that the airport has, in and of itself, taken steps to seize money. Just this week, they seized $8 million coming from Africa headed to the south of Lebanon. And 2 months ago, they seized 50 pounds of gold that Hezbollah was trying to smuggle. You have the effort increasingly by the Lebanese armed forces to control the south. So you have a lot of important and courageous steps in Lebanon. And you also have an increasingly vocal media and civil society who are increasingly slowly, but increasingly showing their support for peace, because they don't want to be under the thumb of extremism and they don't want an independent terror group governed by Tehran to plunge the country into war. So you see the window opening, and in Lebanon, it'll be more of a bottom-up approach.
Right, okay. So as you say, two very different cases, perhaps best decoupled in a way, rather than saying let's normalize ties with Lebanon and Syria at the same time, given they are so different and two totally different sets of circumstances. Let's start with Syria, and then we'll talk a bit more about Lebanon. So we heard General Petraeus speaking to me just now, and he says that the new Syrian leader is, quote, saying all the right things. And you've sort of been saying something quite similar as well. I mean, is he doing the right things as well as saying them?
He is saying the right things. He's doing some of the right things. I know for me personally, the movement that I would like to see more of on his part is an effort to protect minorities. I know he keeps saying this over and over again. We've seen some horrific attacks. We saw one just a couple weeks ago against a church. And that's not the first one where a church in Syria was attacked. It was not even well covered here in the United States. And so what happens when you see that is that you need to see very loud moves against any effort, against terrorists, against extremists, in their effort to threaten. So he needs to hold those perpetrators to account very loudly and harshly. And we haven't exactly seen enough of that yet. So there are certain things that he still needs to be better about. And then there are other things that are promising. For example, the partnership between the army and the Kurds, for example. This is a significant one. The way they crafted the new government and the fact that they've involved and included individuals of different faiths and different backgrounds, some women as well, right? So there are positive steps. I don't mean to imply that this is an easy task. But at the same time, I know for me personally, the thing that I'm going to look toward is protection of minorities, and I don't feel that he's got that formula down just yet.
Right. Of course, there were 25 people killed, as you say, in an attack on a church on the 22nd of June. So for people who are watching, you think this is all a little early. Shouldn't some concessions and some promises and some assurances be made by the new leadership in Syria before anything is given to them by way of an olive branch? I mean, what do you say to that?
Well, I would caution in viewing the situation between Syria and Israel, or Lebanon and Israel, in any way similar to the way it is between the Israelis and Palestinians. You just don't have the same number of challenges and conflicts and problems as you do between the Israelis and Palestinians, for example. So as it is an easier deal to make between the Syrians and Israelis. Yes, with any peace deal, you have a series of steps that would need to happen. You have mutual recognition. You have a promise to respect each other's borders, of course. You have, with Syria specifically, you have the question of the Golan Heights, which is a significant one. That's not something that the Lebanese have, for example. So you do have these things, but they're surmountable. And the reason for that is that al-Shara sees the light on the other side. He sees that peace would come with acceptance in the international financial system. Already, Trump has removed sanctions, but the Trump administration was also very clear that removal of sanctions comes with an invitation to join the Abraham Accords, and they are working on that at the moment. You have investment opportunities to rebuild Syria. So al-Shara sees this opportunity that would ultimately lead to his own strength and his own power. And that's one of the reasons why a lot of these things that always felt insurmountable are very different in today's light. So if it feels like it's moving fast, it is moving fast, but it's frankly, the way Hayat Tahrir al-Sham made Damascus collapse was also very fast. And all of these, by the way, all of these topics, these are not things we would have even been able to discuss last year at this time. It's really since last fall when Hezbollah was decapitated, Iran was put on the defense because its defense missile capabilities were struck by Israel, and Assad flew like a coward to Moscow. That's the only reason this is now moving so quickly.
Yeah, it is moving really quickly. One thing I just want to pick up on, and you mentioned that this is a very different situation than between Israel and the Palestinians, but one thing that both Syria and Lebanon have in common is that they're both home to hundreds of thousands of Palestinians. Many of whom have been there since 1948. They're descendants of people who fled the foundation of Israel. I mean, could they put up some sort of resistance, or do you think there just aren't enough of them and they're not organized in such a way that they could stand in the way of any kind of normalization of ties with Israel?
You know, that's a good question. They could try, but they wouldn't succeed. And the reason they wouldn't succeed is because, not so much because of numbers, but because these are two countries that have suffered long enough. And there is no more of a desire to hold out on their own stability and prosperity in order to support a Palestinian cause, when supporting that Palestinian cause has literally done nothing for them or for the Palestinians, frankly, over the last several decades. So sometimes when you hear some arguments, and I frankly, I hear it as the minority at this point, these arguments of, no, we need to hold out for a Palestinian state, that's really a strategy of cutting off your nose to spite your face, because not only has that policy not worked over the last several decades, but you're at a moment now where, like I said, the two countries have suffered enough. And they're at a crossroads where one decision to make peace with Israel could unlock significant amounts of aid, investment, could remove the shadow of war and violence that could break out overnight, is one of the things that has held these countries back so much. So the fact is that things have shifted. The mindset has shifted. And I don't want to mean it's not by everybody, of course, but you do have this growing movement of civil society and media starting to view things differently. They're fed up with the shadow of violence. And by the way, Hezbollah, just today, al-Sharq al-Awsat reported that Hezbollah has told its inhabitants in the south of Beirut, in Dahieh, that they're going to have to freeze the funding for their rebuilding because they don't have the funds. Right? So, and I add this anecdote to explain to you why people, the civil society, don't see anymore the value in holding out their own prosperity and stability for the sake of the Palestinian cause. So again, they might try, but I would add two last things, which is that the Trump administration told Syria that as part of the work they're going to be doing together in the removal of sanctions, that they would need to kick out Palestinian terrorists. And in Lebanon as well, they arrested Hamas terrorists, which is something I have not seen in the over 20 years I've worked in the Middle East. And they're even working with Mahmoud Abbas, who himself called for the disarmament of Palestinian terrorists in Lebanon. So I think that camp, they're on the losing side.
I mean, just turning our attention specifically to Lebanon, I mean, a normalization of ties between Israel and Lebanon, something that would have been completely unimaginable even a few months ago. I mean, wouldn't that render Hezbollah completely irrelevant? Isn't Hezbollah's whole raison d'etre, in a way, resistance and protection, as they put it, against Israel?
Absolutely. It would completely undermine their entire raison d'etre, as you said. Hezbollah was created by Iran, something that people forget. It was created by Iran in the 1980s to, quote, resist Israel. And then over the decades, they took on this added narrative where they were so-called protecting the Lebanese citizens from Israel, except that they did nothing to protect them. On the contrary, all they did was devolve the country into war in 2006 and then again last year. And on top of it, now they're not even able to pay for the reconstruction of homes of their own people, of their members, of their supporters, of the Shia Lebanese whom they promised to protect. And so if you do have a peace deal and Hezbollah's stated reason is to pursue this resistance, then absolutely their cause becomes completely irrelevant. Now, what happens after that, whether they completely fall into the dustpan of history or whether they turn into some kind of political party is hard to say. I would say it's hard to envision them as a political party because ultimately their ties are with Tehran and with the Iranian regime in particular, which is currently licking its wounds. But that said, either path could be the outcome of peace with Israel. The fact is that they don't have the strength at all that they used to just a year ago, as you said. And it's a very, very different program now. And the thing that you're seeing in Lebanon is it's almost like prisoners who've been set free. They've been set free, and now they're figuring out that what they can seek, how they can be a sovereign nation, the Lebanese government, how it can be a sovereign nation and make its own decisions in its own national security and foreign policy objectives. And without Hezbollah stepping on its neck, it's able to do that. So that's why I have hope for it. But I will say the Lebanese government in its public statements needs to go further. They need to stop calling Israel the enemy. They need to focus on and listen to what their civil society is saying in terms of the peace they want, even if it's a cold peace. And I would add that that's an important point. No one is asking these sides to marry each other. Cold peace is very doable, achievable, and a very direct way to support the prosperity and future stability of these countries.
Right, so in some ways we're back to 1990, aren't we? At the end of the civil war in Lebanon, when all militant groups were told to disarm, all of them did, except for one, which is, of course, Hezbollah, and now perhaps that's going to happen. We're coming to the end. I just want to ask you a comment that was made by a senior US diplomat on Sunday, Tom Burges. He said that the Iran-Israel ceasefire could pave the way for a new Middle East. What do you think of that?
I would agree with him completely. I think that we're seeing a reshaping of the Middle East in a way that we haven't seen in decades, which is why I have so much hope. I've worked on this region for over 20 years, and I've never had the hope I've had now. And a lot of it started really with, as I mentioned earlier, the decapitation of Hezbollah, the decimation of Hamas. The Houthis are the JV team sitting in Yemen. But really at the core of this is the Iranian regime, which was put on its defenses after their own defense missile capabilities were taken out last fall and they were humiliated. And certainly that's augmented now, where they've just suffered all these strikes and they couldn't even tell when the B-2 bombers were crossing into their airspace to strike their nuclear program. That doesn't make the regime look good, and I don't expect them to flex their muscles very much. So he's right. When you're talking about in my own work, when I worked in counterterrorism and government, the root of most of our problems, I would say 75% of our problems, the root of it was created by the Iranian regime and its proxies across the region. So if you eliminate that, it completely reshapes the Middle East and allows countries to partner with Israel because they know it's in their own interest, whether it's economic, it's an effort to push back against extremism, it gives them a guarantee to push back against Iran, all of these steps. And then I would just add one final thing. And it's really important because like I said, I work on these issues very closely. And in February at the Munich Security Conference, I was there arguing for Israel-Lebanon peace. And it was at that time very novel, new, controversial a little bit. I had to convince people of the argument. And we are not even 5 months later. And now that's the topic du jour. It's in the public discourse. And it feels like that train has left the station. And so I would say to the leaders in particular, I think Al-Shara gets this, but the Lebanese in particular, and I think this is why Tom Burges said this, it takes much more courage in the Middle East to make peace than war. And this is the time to seize that. Now is the time to seize that, in particular while the regime licks its wounds. Okay. The Iranian regime.
All right, we're going to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed. Really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us. Hagar Chemali, thank you so much indeed.
Thank you.
Well, as we've been saying, Israel says it is interested in establishing official ties with former foes Syria and Lebanon. Let's take a listen to what the Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Saar had to say about this.
Israel is interested in expanding the Abraham Accord circle of peace and normalization. We have an interest in adding countries such as Syria and Lebanon, our neighbors, to the circle of peace and normalization, while safeguarding Israel's essential and security interests. Israel applied its law to the Golan Heights over 40 years ago. In any peace agreement, the Golan will remain part of the State of Israel. We will welcome Syria, as I said, to the peace and normalization circle in the Middle East as much as we will welcome the Saudis to join.
The Israeli Foreign Minister speaking there. Well, let's bring into the conversation Dan Meridor, who is a former Deputy Prime Minister of Israel and Minister of Intelligence. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us. Always a pleasure having you on the programme. We just heard there the Israeli Foreign Minister talking about the possibility of a normalization of ties between your country and Lebanon and Syria. Put this into perspective for us. How significant would such a move be?
if it were that this move is going to be realized, it's a historic move. You know, think of it in historic perspective. In the beginning, no Arab country recognized us. They want to kick us off the Middle East. In 1977-79, President Sadat of Egypt, Prime Minister Begin of Israel, were the first to change history, and we had peace with Egypt. 94, there was peace between Israel and Jordan, Prime Minister Rabin and the late King Hussein of Jordan. And then there were the Abraham Accords, not with the neighboring countries, but with the Arab countries. Relationships have developed in North Africa and the Gulf areas with many countries, not officially, but they were very meaningful. If now we come to an arrangement where we have normal relationship with Lebanon and Syria, it's a major step forward and really a change, a radical change in the Middle East for the better, for more stability, more peace, less war, less hostilities. And of course, we need to end the war in Gaza as soon as possible.
Just before we crossed you, we were listening to the foreign minister, and he was quite quick to put a major condition on the table before we've even got to a negotiating table. He's already talking about the Golan Heights, saying Golan will remain part of the state of Israel. I mean, it's a little early, isn't it, to be laying down conditions before the negotiations have even started, especially one as big as that?
Well, again, as I'm not in the details, I don't know what goes on behind the scenes. There might have been, I hear, negotiations or talks informal between Israelis and Syrians. I don't know what stage they are in. The issue of the exact borderline is definitely an important issue. Was it raised? What's the Syrian position? I don't know. The Israeli position was put by the foreign minister. If they start negotiating, let's see what happens. But I can only guess. I have no information. If there is a chance, it's important that both parties will be courageous enough to go ahead and snap it and catch it. It not always repeats in history, and it's going to change the Middle East.
Sure. I mean, things are still raw, and understandably so, for people in Lebanon, for example, areas that have been bombarded in the last few months by Israel. Some people feeling raw in Syria as well, because there's been some Israeli military activity in Syria, and of course this issue of the Golan Heights. Do you anticipate, Mr. Meridor, that there could be some resistance from these two countries to the idea of a normalization of ties with Israel?
Well, in the Arab countries, there's always been resistance, which is why we didn't have an agreement until this day. If there is a change on the Arab side, Syria and Lebanon, I do believe that in Israel, there may be a very clear majority for it. Yes, there were bombardments in the Galilee. In Israel, hundreds of thousands of people left the Galilee because we were bombarded by Hezbollah. There were attacks on the other side, you're right. But let's see if we can get over it. And the story of war, and as Hezbollah has been badly hit by Israel, and I hope the Lebanese government is in charge now. With the new president, they seem to be much more in charge of all the power and forces in Lebanon. If they can have control over it and they're ready to normalize relationship with us, with Lebanon, there's no question of border. The borderline is agreed. I don't think there's any problem. With Syria, there may be a problem of the exact borderline. They need to start to talk. I don't know what happens behind the scenes. I do hope that both sides understand how meaningful, important, historically, is that minute if there is readiness to end the conflict and normalize the relationship, as we have with Jordan and Egypt.
When the US President Donald Trump was in Riyadh last month, we saw him with the new president of Syria, Ahmed al-Shara, and he seemed to be welcoming him into the international fold, bringing him in from the cold. So clearly enthusiasm on the US side. Do you get the impression the Israelis are as enthusiastic, or do you think they're a little bit more cautious on this particular one?
Again, I can't speak for the government. I'm not there. I think they should be very enthusiastic, and they may be very enthusiastic. Instead of dealing all the time with war and attacks and defense, if you can bring peace to this border, this is going to be great. It's in the Israeli interest, no doubt. There may be problems along the way, but I do think that for the Israeli state, it's important, and for politicians, it's important to speak of peace and stability rather than of war and trouble.
Both countries are homes to large numbers of Palestinian refugees, many of whom have been there since 1948, and perhaps third, fourth generation by now. Do you see them putting up some resistance, perhaps until such time as a peace deal is struck with Gaza, until a ceasefire in Gaza?
Well, I do hope this war in Gaza ends this minute. It should have ended over a year ago, and it's too long, and it's too costly, and it's bad for all sides. This is one thing. There may be resistance, but in the end, you see, Israel is built on so many hundreds of thousands of people, Jews who were in Arab states, refugees, if you like, Arab states living in Israel, some Arabs who were in then Palestine live in Jordan, where they have quite a majority, I think, there, and some in Lebanon and some in Syria. They can be integrated as our people are integrated. And I think it can be done if there is a will and a leadership to lead in that direction. We had negotiations, with Syria several times, and the previous prime minister did never end in a good result. And there were negotiations with Lebanon. You may not remember, in 1983, there was an agreement of peace signed between Israel and Lebanon by President Amin Gemayel. And then the Syrians intervened and didn't let him go on with it. Hopefully they can do it now. The Palestinians there, some of them are residents and citizens of Syria and Lebanon, some of them are not. They need to be integrated where they are and find wherever they want to go. This does not resolve the Palestinian problem, which needs to be resolved. It's not just Gaza. Gaza is ruled by Hamas. In the West Bank, or Judea and Samaria, as we call it, there still is an unresolved issue, and we need to come to that as well, although now it seems to be in a big disarray between the Palestinian Hamas and PLO, and on the Israeli side as well.
Well, President Trump seems to be optimistic that there will be a ceasefire in Gaza fairly soon. At least that's the latest indications we're getting from Washington. But just on the issue of normalization between Israel and Syria and Lebanon, what sort of a time frame would you imagine we'd be looking at here? Are we talking months or years, do you think?
Well, as I don't know the details and what happened behind the scenes, I can only make a guess. I hope intelligent one, but not informed one. It does not need a long time. With Lebanon, where there is no problem on borderline, it can be done immediately if Lebanon is ready and able to control its own land, and Israel definitely is. It can be done immediately. There were years ago when we had open gates between Lebanon and Israel. Lebanese people came to work in Israel. It all collapsed after that, unfortunately, in 2006 and so forth. With Syria, it has never been the case, but it can be done if there's an agreement. There is a will, you see. It's quite abnormal. A country is neighboring me, and I'm neighboring them. Why can't we see each other? After all, yes, there's war and problem, but if there is no war, and if there's readiness and will to know each other, both countries or all countries can benefit from it.
One of the things that has really struck me, and I've talked to a couple of our guests in the last 24 hours about this, is a comment from a Middle East-based diplomat from the United States by the name of Tom Burges. He says that a ceasefire between Iran and Israel could pave the way for a whole new Middle East. Mr. Merriweather, what do you read into that?
Well, I can't go into the head of someone I don't know and haven't heard, but I have said the following. If there is this expanding of stability and peace between us and Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states and Syria and Lebanon, there is sort of counterbalance between Iran and the others. After all, Iran was a threat to Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and all the others. They all say it. So I think there is a way to what they call the moderate Sunni countries, and Israel can create more stability. But I would say something further, which is a longer range view, may seem somewhat naive. There is no inherent conflict between Israel and Iran. If Iran stops speaking about destroying Israel and accept Israel as a legitimate neighbor in the Middle East, there's no reason why we should not have a good relationship with Iran. We had it until the revolution of '79 with the mullahs coming in. You remember that when the Shah was deposed. We had a very good relationship. There is no border problem. The Iranians speak in religious terms that Israel is not legitimate, it should be removed. As long as this is the case, there cannot be reconciliation. We need the Iranians to change this rhetoric, and there is no reason not to have good relationship with Iran as well, for us and for the others. We got used to the normalcy of war and conflict. This is not normal. Normal is to try to live without it and find compromises and solutions. That may be a first sign now, as our foreign minister said, if it materializes. Again, don't take my word for more than what it is. I don't know more than you know. I very much hope that this hope of peace will materialize in some time. And if it does, it may be a big move that will change the Middle East.
But as an Israeli national and someone who's held high office in Israel, and I'm imagining you continue to follow current affairs with keen interest in your country, does it feel like we're at a crossroads, the like of which we haven't been at for perhaps in living memory? Is that how it feels right now?
I would return to what I said earlier. I think it's not even the question of what the street says or the masses say. It's a question of leadership. It takes leaders to lead. Sadat and Begin were leaders. Hussein and Rabin were leaders. They led to a change in the Middle East. If there's leadership here, not just following the intuitions and the emotions and the instincts of the masses, that is very easy to incite, then there is a chance here to change the Middle East in a positive way, to make it a prosperous and peaceful area. So it all depends on leadership, not the sentiment. The sentiment will follow. I think that if there is an agreement or agreements in that respect, there will be a very big support to it in Israel. There may be some objection, but in the minority.
Okay, and talking of leadership, do you think we've got to this point because of the leadership and the vision of Israel's current Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu? Do you think he had a strategy that brought us to this point, or does it look to you, and I know you're an outsider from the political world now, but does it look to you like we arrived at this point somehow by accident?
Well, it is not by accident, you know. Please don't drag me into Israeli politics. I have this old-fashioned rule that I don't attack my government when I talk to foreign press, with all due respect to your respectable network. I don't do it with any other network. I have a lot of criticism on my government now. I'm in opposition to it, but I don't do it abroad. We are where we are now, and forget the past for a minute. Let's look for the future. Whether we could have done it earlier or not, it's good speculation. I don't want to go into it. We have a chance now, so it seems, to change the course on which the Middle East was for too many years now, which was very bloody and costly. And if there is a chance, it takes leadership to change the course. I hope they will do it.
And just lastly, to bring this conversation to a conclusion, Mr. Meridor, you've had a career that spanned several decades. Just looking at the point we're at now, did you ever imagine we would be talking in the year 2025 about the normalization of ties between your country, Lebanon and Israel, and possibly even later on down the line, or maybe at the same time, peace and normalization of ties with Iran? Did you ever imagine this would happen?
Yes, I thought it may happen. I don't believe in the things that have to happen because this is the cause of history by God or by some other thing. No, it's all in the hands of people. I knew there were big challenges. Iran, Hezbollah, Hamas introduced religion into the conflict. It's a religious commandment not to accept a non-Muslim state. If that was the case, there wouldn't be any peace. But if this changes, if they were quite substantially hit now, and there are other forces who want to live in peace and stability and beneficial prosperity for both sides, there is a basic will to do it. And that I very much hope. We tried it for many years. Sometimes we succeeded, sometimes less. Now there seems to be a chance. Let's go for it.
Okay, well, on that positive note, we'll wrap up this conversation. Thank you very much indeed, Dan Meridor, former Deputy Prime Minister of Israel. Thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you very much.
Well, that's all we've got time for on Global News today. We've heard there about the possibility of a normalization of ties between Israel, Lebanon and Syria, something that some of our guests said they didn't expect to see in their lifetimes. We also heard from the father of Elon Musk, this amidst a growing feud between the world's richest man, Elon Musk, and the world's most powerful man, the President of the United States. All of that on today's edition of GNT. Look forward to seeing you again tomorrow. Until then, bye-bye.